Number one, King Parsinabharti replied, "My dear lords, we could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical story." Yes?
Sorry. It's,
What's that?
no, it was your voice, but go ahead.
Okay. Talks between Narada and King Parsinabharti. King Parsinabharti replied, "My dear lord, we could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical story of King Puranjana. Actually, those who are perfect in spiritual knowledge can understand, but for us who are overly attached to fruitive activities, to realize the purpose of your story is very difficult. Purport by His Divine Grace, Bhakti, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In Bhagavad Gita 7:13, Lord Krishna says, Kribhir Gunamayer Bhavir, Eve Sarvam Idam Jagat, Mohitam Abhijanati, Mam Evya Param Avyayam. Deluded by uh, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. The whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. Generally, people are enchanted by the three modes of material nature and therefore practically unable to understand that behind all materialistic activities in the cosmic manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Generally, when people are engaged in sinful or pious activities, they are not perfect in knowledge of devotional service. The allegorical story narrated by Narada to King Barhisman is especially meant to engage conditioned souls in devotional service. The entire story, narrated allegorically, is easily understood by a person in devotional service. Okay, so let's get this straight. We have two interesting words here. One is allegorically, and the other is, okay, let's just start with allegorically. It's something that is not exactly true, but it helps one to understand uh, something else. So uh, that's why it says generally, when people are engaged in sinful or pious activities, they are not perfect in knowledge of devotional service. The allegorical story narrated by Narada Muni to King Barhisman is especially meant to engage conditioned souls in devotional service. So it is a story, not necessarily true, but it's a story that helps us to understand more, let's say, more profoundly uh, the something else. What is it? Something else? It is what Narada Muni is teaching to King Barhisman. So he tells a story, and it's meant to engage the conditioned souls in devotional service. And as it says here, the entire story narrated allegorically, meaning uh, the story itself is not true, but it helps to understand what is the truth. So the entire story, narrated allegorically, is easily understood by a person in devotional service. But those who are engaged not in devotional service, but in sense gratification, cannot perfectly understand it. That is admitted by King Barhisman. The 29th chapter describes that by too much attachment for women, one becomes a woman in the next life. But a person who associates with the Supreme Personality Godhead or his representative becomes free from all material attachments and is thus liberated. And then is thus liberated. Well, is there something wrong to be born as a woman? That's something that can be debated. uh, Women are not excluded from becoming devotees in Krishna consciousness. However, there is a difference between a man and a woman when we think in terms of sense gratification. Obviously, there's a difference. But even though there might be a difference on the level of sense gratification, when a woman becomes surrendered to her husband and engages in Krishna consciousness, there's no difference anymore because the woman is functioning in the same way as the man in serving the Lord. That's the main point. That's why it says here generally, when people are engaged in sinful or pious activities, they're not perfect in knowledge of devotional service. So, this statement refers to both men and women. The allegorical story narrated by Narada Muni to King Barhisman is especially meant to engage conditioned souls in devotional service. So sometimes people can tell a story. The story may not necessarily be something that's actually true in the sense of being validated by history, but it helps to understand uh, the uh, the behavior of people. So it says here the entire story narrated allegorically is easily understood by a person in devotional service. But those who are engaged not in devotional service, but in sense gratification, cannot perfectly understand it. That is admitted by King Barhisman. So here we have a story that is specifically to help us understand some transcendental, uh, let's say, situations and knowledge. And it's easily understood by devotees, but not so by non-devotees. Those who are engaged in sense gratification cannot perfectly understand it. So therefore, too much attachment for women, one becomes a woman in the next life. But a person who associates with the Supreme Personality Godhead or his representative becomes free from all material attachments and is thus liberated. So it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman. What matters is if one is engaged in the service of Krishna and is not, let's say, still attached or bewildered by sense gratification. And that's why it says But a person who associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative becomes free from all material attachments and is thus liberated. So this refers to either men or women. Text 2. The great sage Narada Muni continued, you must understand that Puranjana, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, or simply legless. So different types of living entities. And this is referring to different types of living entities that one can have when they are not Krishna conscious. Transmigrating into various types of bodies, the living entity, as the so-called enjoyer, is known as Puranjana. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. How the spirit soul transmigrates from one type of body to another is nicely described here. The word ekapada, one-legged, refers to ghosts, for it is said that ghosts walk on one leg. I didn't know that. That's interesting. That ghosts walk on one leg only.
We heard that the ghosts walk with the feet backwards, but
Yeah, I didn't know they walk on one leg. That's interesting. The word dvipada, meaning biped, refers to human beings. Yeah, that means they walk on two legs. When he is old and invalid, the human being is supposed to be triped or three-legged because he walks with the help of a stick or some kind of cane. Of course, the word chatuspada refers to quadrupeds or walking with four legs or animals. The word bahupada refers to those creatures who have more than four legs. There are many insects, such as centipede, and also many aquatic animals that have many legs. The words apadaka, meaning without legs, refers to serpents. The name Puranjana indicates one who enjoys possessing different types of bodies. His mentality for enjoyment in the material world is accommodated by different types of bodies. Yeah. We get different types of bodies due to different types of sense gratification that we want. But when we want only Krishna and engage only in devotional service, we get an eternal body that is no longer subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. That's the body that we should hanker for or desire. Text 3. The person I have described as unknown is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Master and eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entity cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unknown to the conditioned soul, he is sometimes described in Vedic literatures as Nirakara, Avigyata, and Avan Manasa Gochara. Actually, it is a fact that the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be perceived by material senses as far as his form, name, quality, pastimes, or paraphernalia are concerned. Well, when Jesus Christ appeared in this world, many people, most people didn't understand him. He was only understood by a handful of people. And same with Krishna. When he appears, usually mundane people don't understand him. But people who have surrendered to the Lord and are engaged in devotional service are capable of understanding him. However, when one is spiritually advanced, one can understand the name, form, qualities, pastimes, and paraphernalia of the Supreme Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 1855. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanch yaschasmi tattva. One can understand in truth the Supreme Personality of Godhead only when one is engaged in devotional service. Ordinary persons engaged in pious and impious activities cannot understand the form, name, activities of the Lord. The devotee, however, can know the personality of Godhead in many respects. He can understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that his address is Goloka Vrindavana, and that his activities are all spiritual. Because the Lord's form and activities cannot be understood by materialistic people, he is described by the Shastras as Nirakara, that is, one whose form cannot be ascertained by materialistic person. This does not mean that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no form. It means that it is not understood by the karmis, or fruitive activities, or sense gratifiers. His form is described in Brahma Samhita as Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, as confirmed by the Padma Purana. Atakshi Krishna Namadi Na Bhavet Rayam Indriyai Sevan Mukhe Jiva Do Swayam Evaspurat Yada. No one can understand Krishna as he is by utilizing the blunt material senses. However, the Lord reveals himself to his devotees, being pleased with them because of their transcendental loving service rendered unto him. Since the name, form, qualities, and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna cannot be understood by material senses, he is also known as Adhoksaja, meaning beyond sense perception. When the senses are purified by devotional service activity, the devotee understands everything about the Lord by the Lord's grace. In this verse, the words Pumbir Namabir Va Kriya Gunai are especially significant because God, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has many names, activities, and qualities, although none of them are material. Despite the fact that all these names, activities, and pastimes are mentioned in the Shastras and understood by the devotees, the karmis, or fruitive laborers, cannot understand them, nor can the jnanis, mental speculators, understand them. Although there are thousands of names of Lord Vishnu, the karmis, jnanis intermingle the names of the Supreme Godhead with names of demigods and human beings because they cannot understand the actual name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They take for granted that any name can be accepted. They believe that since the absolute truth is impersonal, they can call him by any name. Otherwise, they maintain he has no name. This is not a fact. Here it is clearly stated, Namabir va Kriya Gunai. The Lord has specific names such as Rama, Krishna, Govinda, Narayana, Vishnu, and Adhoksaja. These are indeed many names, but the conditioned soul cannot understand them. When we are conditioned, we are under the spell of an illusory state, and we don't really understand things as they are. We project our own misunderstanding on whatever we see. So we don't see correctly, let's put it like that. Text 4. When the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality, he prefers, out of many bodily forms, to accept that body which has 9 gates, 2 hands, and 2 legs. Thus, he prefers to become a human being or demigod. Yeah, because one can engage mostly or most as a human being, not as a dog. I mean, a dog has some pleasure also, but it's not as intense as that as a human being. Purport. This is a very nice explanation of how the spiritual being, the part and parcel of Krishna, God, accepts a material body by virtue of his own desires. Accepting 2 hands, 2 legs, and so on, the living entity fully enjoys the modes of material nature. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.27, Icha dvesa samutena dvanda mohenam bharata sarvabhutani samoham sarge antipurantapa. O Skyan Bharat of Bharata, Arjuna, conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. Well, that is a very, very profound statement, and it's a fact. All living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. Originally, the living entity is a spiritual being, but when he actually desires to enjoy this material world, he comes down. From this verse, we can understand that the living entity first accepts a body that is human in form, but gradually, due to his degraded activities, he falls into lower forms of life, into the animal, plant, aquatic forms, By the gradual process of evolution, the living entity again attains the body of a human being and is given another chance to get out of the process of transmigration. If he again misses his chance in the human form to understand his position, he is again placed in the cycle of birth and death in various types of bodies. Well, these things have happened to us in our different lifetimes. The desire of the living entity to come into the material world is not very difficult to understand. Although one may be born in a family of Aryans, where there are restrictions against meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex, still one may want to enjoy these forbidden things. There is always someone who wants to go to a prostitute for illicit sex or to a hotel to eat meat and drink wine. There is always someone who wants to gamble at nightclubs or enjoy so-called sports. All these propensities are already within the hearts of living entities, but some living entities stop to enjoy these abominable activities and consequently fall down to a degraded platform. Let me read that again. But some living entities stop to enjoy these abominable activities and consequently fall down to. So when it says stop to enjoy, uh, it means they are they are engaged in enjoyment of sense gratification. Although it sounds as if they give up sense gratification. Let's read again. There is always someone who wants to gamble at nightclubs or enjoy so-called sports. All these propensities are already within the hearts of the living entities, but some living entities stop to enjoy these abominable activities and consequently fall down to a degraded platform. The more one desires a degraded life within his heart, the more he falls down to occupy different forms of abominable existence. This is the process of transmigration and evolution. A particular type of animal may have a strong tendency to enjoy one kind of sense enjoyment, but in the human form, one can enjoy all the senses. The human form has the facility to utilize all the senses for gratification. Unless one is properly trained meaning education, he becomes a victim of the modes of material nature. As confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasa Ahankara Vimudatma Kartaham Iti Manyate. The bewildered soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. As soon as one desires to enjoy his senses, he puts himself under the control of material energy and automatically or mechanically is placed into the cycle of birth and death in various life forms. Yeah, this is what we have all experienced in this lifetime and in many lifetimes. Text 5. The great sage Narada continued. The word pramada mentioned in this regard refers to material intelligence or ignorance. It is to be understood as such. When one takes shelter of this kind of intelligence, he identifies himself with the material body, influenced by the material consciousness of I and mine. He begins to enjoy and suffer through his senses. Thus, the living entity is entrapped. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In material existence, so-called intelligence is actually ignorance. That's true. When intelligence is cleared up, it is called Buddhi Yoga. In other words, when intelligence is dovetailed with the desires of Krishna, it is called Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita 10:10, Krishna says, Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam budami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted with and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. This is a very important verse. We should pay attention to it. We should follow it. And we should more or less fall in love with Krishna. Real intelligence means linking with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When this is done, the Supreme Personality of Godhead from within gives one the real intelligence by which one can return home back to Godhead. So we see here that the mundane knowledge that we learn in schools is not necessarily knowledge. It is misunderstandings that keep us entangled in the process of sense gratification. That's why it says here, intelligence in the material world is described in this verse as pramada, because in material existence, the living entity falsely claims things to be his. He thinks, I am the monarch of all I survey. This, of course, is ignorance. Actually, nothing belongs to him. Even the body and the senses do not belong to him, for they are given to him by the grace of the Lord to satisfy his different propensities through material energy. Nothing actually belongs to the living entity. Okay, let's repeat it twice. Nothing belongs to him. Nothing belongs to the living entity, but he becomes mad after everything, claiming this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Janasya moham mohoyam aham mameti. Everything belongs to him. This is the false, the false identity of the living entity. This is called illusion. Nothing belongs to the living entity, but he claims that everything belongs to him. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that this false intelligence be purified. Chaitra Darpana Marchanam. When the mirror of intelligence is polished, the real activities of living entity begin. That means the living entity gets involved in genuine devotional service. This means that when a person comes to the platform of Krishna consciousness, his real intelligence acts. At that time, he knows that everything belongs to Krishna and nothing belongs to him. So the concept of proprietorship is very, very important in Krishna consciousness and is not understood by mundane people. They think everything can belong to them, but the devotee knows that he is not the proprietor of anything. Everything belongs to the Lord. Therefore, the devotee surrenders to Krishna, knowing well that everything belongs to the Lord. Therefore, everything should be used in the service of the Lord. That's real knowledge. But when one is in illusion, they think that they have the potential of owning everything in the material world. So they uh, begin to engage in uh, activities to control the material energy for their sense gratification. They build big skyscrapers, they have nice cars, they have nice clothing, they more or less just meditate on the accumulation of wealth for sense gratification. And the whole endeavor is false and uh, will mislead a person to waste their time in this lifetime and fall back again into the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. As long as one thinks that everything belongs to him, he is in material consciousness. And when he knows perfectly that everything belongs to Krishna, he is in Krishna consciousness. Well, even a child, a 2 year old or 4 year old or 5 year old child, thinks that everything belongs to him. I remember when I first went to kindergarten, I had a little shovel and a pail. And the first day I went to kindergarten, somebody grabbed my pail and shovel and started playing with them. And I got really upset and I was crying. And the teacher came and said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Well, someone took my shovel and my pail." So that is the situation of material existence. We want to enjoy sense gratification in different ways, and there's interruptions by bullies who who are stronger than we are or more uh, adept at cheating, and then we cry and we get upset because we lost our what we thought was sense gratification. So that's going on all the time on all levels. Even the PhDs um, fall down into such illusory concepts that everything belongs to me, and when they lose everything, they begin to lament. Text 6. The five working senses and the five senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Puranjana. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagements of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpent, which was described as having 5 heads, is the life air acting within the 5 circulatory processes. Okay, that's interesting. Purport. Krishna Bahirmukha Hana Bhoga Vanchakare Nikatasta Maya Tare Japatiya Dare Prema Vivarta. That's the book in which this verse appears in. Because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends, sometimes because of too much sinful activity. The living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform like a ghost. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body. As stated in Bhagavatam, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.10, Utkraman tam stitam vapi punjanam va gunanvitam vimuda nanapashyanti pashyanti jnana chaksusa. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So we must have the tutelage or the education of Krishna consciousness, by which we can see things as they are and not be illusions in this world. The living entities are merged into the air of life, which acts in different ways for circulation. There is prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in this fivefold way, it is compared to the 5-hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Uraga, the serpent. Pancha vritti is the desire to satisfy the senses, attracted by 5 sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. Okay, and this is really very good information. 1 second. Text number 7. Actually, I want to go back to text number 6, where it says, Utkramantam stitam vapi punjanam va gunanvitam vimudha pashyanti jnana chaksusa. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged into the air of life, which acts in different ways for circulation. There is prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in this fivefold way, it is compared to the five-hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Uraga, the serpent. Panchavritti is the desire to satisfy the senses, attracted by the five sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. So this very profound statements. We have to think about this carefully. So this verse, or the verse in this purport, says, Krishna Bahir Mukhana Boga Vanchatkare, Nikatasta Mayatare Japatiya Dare. And this is from the Prema Vivarta book of spiritual knowledge. And it says, because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Yeah, it's interesting where the clothing or the dress is equated with the body. We all have a gross body, and we also have subtle bodies. Thus, the living entity is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore, one second, are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform, meaning having a ghostly body because of too much sense gratification. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Yeah, there are ghosts. That's not a false narrative. There actually are living entities who are ghosts, and they are living entities who who are engaging or who have engaged in sense gratification intensely, and therefore they get a ghostly body where which is a subtle body. Therefore, they have very, very strong material desires, but they do not have the human body by which they can enjoy those desires that they have or accomplish the desires that they have. Therefore, they become what's called a ghost. And the ghost tries to control another person's gross body so they can enjoy sense gratification. So they wander around trying to enter into the body of people who are taking intoxicants and are illusioned by sense gratification. And they enter into the body of a person like that. And then they are able to engage in sense gratification through the body of that person who has a what you would call uh, negative conception of life uh, by engaging always in sense gratification, meat eating, gambling, intoxication, and so forth. And when someone is living in that way, they are closer and closer to death. Their desire to live is hampered by their uh, what you would call uh, uh, their bad behavior and bad desires, and such people can be ghostly uh, controlled. A ghost can enter into their mouth. When does a ghost enter into the body of a human being? While they're sleeping, it's a very bad smelling type uh, of uh, of what you would call their saliva comes out of their mouth, and it's usually when they're coming out of the deep sleep and beginning to have uh, what you would call dreams, and this type of very bad smelling, your bad smelling um, saliva comes out of their mouth. That means a ghost has entered their body, and they have, bad dreams, and they are more or less controlled by the ghost. And these are people who don't bathe regularly, don't cut their fingernails, their hygiene is very bad, they don't eat proper foods, they're always living in the mode of ignorance, and they become ghostly haunted. And now the ghost who doesn't have a gross body enters the gross body of such people to enjoy sense gratification. So you'll see, sometimes you'll be in downtown Seattle and you'll see someone walking around talking to himself. That is a ghostly possessed person, right? And you'll see other people engage in horrible activities like shooting up by smoking marijuana or shooting up heroin and things like that. They have all become seized by ghosts who have entered their body and is forcing them to engage in such sense gratificatory activities that are self-destructive. Therefore, Prabhupada writes here, sometimes because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on a subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:10, Utkravantam stitam vapi punjanam va gunanvitam vimuda nanapasyanti pasyanti jnana chaksusa. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged in the air of life, which acts in different ways for circulation. There is prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the light, those are different types of airs of life. And it is compared to, okay, uh, The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Uraga, the serpent. Panchavritti is the desire to satisfy the senses, attracted by five sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. One second. Okay, we can stop right there. And let me just discuss this a little bit. Um, the five, let's read this text 6 again. The five working senses and the five senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagements of the senses are known as girlfriends. And the serpent, which was described as having five heads, is the life air acting within the five circulatory processes. And in the purport, it says, Krishna Bahir Mukha Hana Boga Vanchakare, Nikatasta Mayatare Japatiyatare. This is in the book Prema Vivarta. Because of his, meaning living entities, desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Yeah, I like the way it says the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. So that means that our soul becomes confused and takes up different types of sense gratification. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends, sometimes because of too much sinful activity. The living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Well, someone who engages in too much sinful activity, they get a material gross body, but it is a ghostly body. And in that ghostly body, they create a lot of havoc in the lives of others because a ghost has the same desires as a normal human being, but not a body that can enjoy sense gratification. So they're always trying to take possession of another person's body. And usually when a person is sleeping and then their saliva begins to come out of their mouth, and then when they wake up, they're a little bit disturbed because the saliva has a very bad smell. That means a ghost has entered into their body and is taken over or is controlling now this person. It all happens when a person has bad hygiene, is not regularly engaged in devotional service, especially chanting Hare Krishna, and is always seeking out gross forms of sense gratification. They gradually are uh, fall down into ghostly life, and eventually they will not possess a gross body. They'll have a ghost bodies, and uh, have a lot of trouble with such a subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the ghost body. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:10, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged into the air of life, which acts in different ways for circulation. There is prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in these five-fold ways, it is compared to the five-hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. Often, if I'm not mistaken, the Kundalini chakra is a very small hole on the top of the head through which the soul can exit the body and travel around the world and come back again to the gross body. But sometimes their gross body gets what you would call uh, uh, deteriorated. So when they come back after going around, they're stuck. They can't get back into their gross body. That's when they become ghosts. Okay, so text number 7. Well, actually, we'll start there. Are there any questions anyone has? Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, Dandavat. I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I have seen movies like Exorcist, where the Christian priest comes to the house, and when the gross bodies, has become a ghost, possessed by a ghost, they come and do some chanting, and then they release the ghost from their body, and when they're releasing them, the person is bleeding blood, and all kinds of. Is that kind of what happens truly? Can you explain? Thanks.
Well, there are priests that claim to be ghostbusters, able to talk with the ghost that has taken over the body of someone and convince that ghost to go away. So they have these ghost busting seances. But basically, it's nonsense. It's not nonsense if you are, because ghosts do exist and they can take control of a person's body. But it's because that person is engaged in unhealthy, unclean thoughts and activities. That's why Krishna consciousness is so important, because we learn to bathe regularly, at least twice a day. We learn to, cut our fingernails and toenails. We learn to have hygiene and also to chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra regularly every day and engage in devotional service. Then we will not be ghostly haunted. The ghost will not be able to enter into our body and our mind and take over and put us in a hellish condition of life. But people who are intoxicating, engaged in illicit sex, not bathing regularly, not cutting their fingernails, not not having good hygiene, and always eating horrible things, meat, fish, eggs, all kinds of horrible things. They become ghostly haunted. And because of that, their life becomes hellish. So sometimes you'll be in downtown Seattle and you'll see someone walking around the downtown talking to himself or herself. Those people are ghostly haunted, and the ghost is forcing them to talk uh, to themselves in public. And when you see this, you avoid that person, obviously, but you do see a person who is ghostly haunted and talking to themselves and walking around and not having good hygiene and uh, panhandling and so forth. So uh, that's why it says here, uh, because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material, gross, and subtle bodies. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on a subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Well, that's why we're reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, so that we can see things as they are and not be illusioned and engage in self-destructive activities. The person who is in illusion will engage in self uh, destructive activities, not knowing what are the consequences of intoxication, meat eating, gambling, and so forth. They engage in these type of activities, and because of that, they become ghostly haunted, and the ghost basically forces them to do things that are against their well-being. Therefore, even Prabhupada, once he, I don't know if he purchased a house or he rented a house. I think he rented a house that was very cheap.
House.
Huh?
It was a house bungalow.
Yeah. Now, why was it very cheap? Why was the rent very cheap? Because uh, there was a ghost that lived in that house. Therefore, nobody wanted to rent it, but Prabhupada rented it. And what did he do? He sat down on a rocking chair, I think it was, and he chanted Hare Krishna. And the ghost actually came in front of him and uh, was disturbed by Prabhupada's chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, and he left. And Prabhupada was able to live in that house which had a very cheap, what you would call cheap uh, rent, because it was ghostly haunted. Nobody wanted to live in that house, but Prabhupada basically chased away the ghost and made a nice place to live in that was very cheap. Okay, so are there any questions or comments anyone would like to make? Questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your lecture. Maharaj, I have a question. Now, recently that aeroplane crash happened, right? Like, and all 272 passengers died. Now that can be a haunted place. So, what about the souls? It's they may not pass on, like unless their families do some rituals for them.
Well, it's very good that their families uh, offer uh, the uh, the relatives who have died. They offer prasadam, and the ghost is very pleased to have the possibility of having prasadam and the possibility of hearing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and also recitation of uh, the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. All these things are beneficial for the living entity and for ghosts. And there are many ghosts in this world. So therefore, Prabhupada says, because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with material gross and subtle bodies. So the subtle body is the ghost, and the gross body is that of a human being who's engaged in sense gratification. The ghost has a difficult time engaging in sense gratification because he or she doesn't have a gross body. They have a subtle body. Therefore, they suffer terribly. And their only way of getting sense gratification is to enter into the body of a person who is taking drugs, who is not taking care of the hygiene of their body, who is always talking nonsense, etc. And they take over that person's body. They enter and take over that person's body in order for them to enjoy sense gratification. They need a ghost has a subtle body, but in a subtle body, one cannot enjoy or satisfy the gross material desires they have. So they have to uh, enter the body of a person whose desire to live is not very strong. And therefore, they engage in all kinds of abominable activities, illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, meat eating, and so forth. And they take over the body, and the person acts in very strange ways because now they are possessed by a ghost. That's why it's very important to bathe regularly, to cut our fingernails, to have good physical hygiene, to always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And in this way, we will be free from any ghostly, haunted, let's say, situations. We will not be ghostly. But if we don't have this knowledge out of ignorance, taking LSD, marijuana, and other intoxicants, uh, sleeping too much, not bathing regularly, eating horrible foods, meat, fish, eggs, etc., we will eventually become a ghost. Then we're in big trouble, and we'll have to stay like that for a very long time. So, a devotee, if he or she follows the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, they'll be free from ghostly hauntedness, and they'll be able to function as a devotee and helping people overcome their ghostly habits. It's very important to counter ghostly haunted people with Krishna consciousness, hearing and chanting and feasting. Then a person becomes purified. That should be our, what you would call, welfare activity in life, to help people become free from ghostly haunted life and become purified so that they can use the mind and the senses to please Krishna through devotional service, which is the only way to become free of being ghostly haunted. Krishna, when is put forward, when is the prime, let's say, engagement for a devotee, being engaged in Krishna's service, all bad things go away, including ghosts and other horrible creatures. They leave you alone because they don't like Krishna consciousness and they stay away from it. But if we engage in sinful activities, those ghosts come back because now we've lost our determination to live a spiritual life in this life. But when our desire to live is not very strong, the ghosts will enter into the body and take over and use the body for their own sense gratification and eventually destroy the body. So we should strictly follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness and not be ghostly haunted. And especially regularly chanting every day, minimum 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra out loud. Then the ghosts stay away. Okay. So that's why Prabhupada says today, he says in this purport, he says, because of his desire, this is a living entity, to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material, gross, and subtle bodies. Okay. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because it is not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. This is the presence of a ghost. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:10, Utkramantam stitam vapi punjanam va gunanvitam vimudat nadapashyanti pashyanti chak jnana chakshusam. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged into the air of life, which acts as in different ways for circulation. There's prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in this fivefold way, it is compared to the five-hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Uraga, the serpent. Panchavritti is the desire to satisfy the senses, attracted by five sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. Okay, well, that's the position of a person who is a sense gratifier. When we learn to control our senses and give up sense gratification and take up Krishna consciousness, all these negative influences and ghostly, possessed people and so forth go away. And we're able to have a peaceful life full of love and devotion for Krishna and for living entities who are suffering will be able to pacify their suffering and help them to take up Krishna consciousness seriously also. Otherwise, people live in ignorance throughout their whole life. They become ghostly haunted. They talk nonsense. They do nonsensical things. And they're always in financial trouble, always in difficult situations, complicating their life because they are being controlled by a ghost. And the ghost is self-destructive. Therefore, people take up liquor, illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, and all kinds of unholy types of standard of life. Yeah, people become expert at drinking wine and liquor and whiskey. They become expert at talking to people for sense gratification. They become an expert in when you see someone walk past you and they're talking to themselves, that is a person who's ghostly haunted. You see a lot of those type of people in downtown Seattle. Okay. Are there any questions, comments? Our takeaway for today. Krishna Bahirmukha Hana Bhoga Vanchakare. Nikatasta Maya Tare Japati Adare. This is from the book Prema Vivarta. Because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Yes, so we have a gross body and we have a subtle body. Both of those bodies have to be purified for a devotee to be able to engage in devotional service. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses with the gross and subtle body. The senses are therefore instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as friends. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of a ghost is horrible for those who are living in the gross body. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are open or trained in knowledge can see all this. So this is called Krishna consciousness. When your eyes are trained in knowledge to see what is actually happening to you and in the world. Okay, well, I think we'll stop right there. If we regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, we'll become educated. But education is something that must be engaged in every day. Not, well, 20 years ago, I got a PhD. No, every day we should get a PhD. We should get instructed on how to live and uh, how to engage in activities without being entangled by the principles of karma. That is real spiritual knowledge. Okay, so much for ghosts. If you simply bathe regularly and chant Hare Krishna with a lot of faith and determination, you will not be ghostly haunted. And you will not get a ghost body also. You'll get, at the end of life, you'll get a spiritual body and you'll go back to Godhead. So the only solution to the problems of life is to become Krishna conscious. We should be determined to be Krishna conscious, knowing very well that it's the only way to be free from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, and ghostly life. So I pray, my dear devotees, please always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Regularly chant and hear the Maha Mantra. And this way you will make tangible spiritual progress and go back to Godhead, which is the real goal of a human being, is to go back to Godhead, where he came from originally. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And don't worry, Prabhupada has given us everything we need to be a liberated, pure devotee. So we should honor Prabhupada by following his instructions strictly and doing good to others by giving them the same transcendental knowledge that we have acquired from associating with Prabhupada. Thank you very much and have a good day today. And chant Hare Krishna and be happy. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
So Washington probably just did the coolest thing I've seen any city do in a while. If you own a home in Washington
Hare
and you're
Krishna,
over
Krishna
55,
Krishna,
you
Hare
can now
Rama,
officially apply to have your home insurance rate
Hare
reduced.
Krishna.